Mainstream media is under attack. Well, Donald Trump may be the loudest voice right now. He's not the most effective. That honor goes to Google and Facebook and Twitter and. The impact of social media and search engines on advertising revenues is gutting newspaper, radio, and television newsrooms. There are more news outlets today and fewer journalists, more press releases and less reporting, more sensational headlines and less digging. Consolidation, generic mastheads along with cut and paste mean politicians and public figures just might be getting a free pass. The role of the media is to be a watchdog, to be the canary in the coal mine, to be an early warning system. Sadly, the watching and the warning are diminishing as budgets shrink. Fortunately, however, journalists are innovative. They find new ways of carrying out the responsibility of keeping governing institutions accountable. We invited Harold Munro, the editor-in-chief of the Vancouver Sun, to join us for a conversation that matters about the role of the mainstream media in a democracy.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Harold Munro, thanks for inviting us into your office. This is, Action Central for, I think you would argue that the Vancouver Sun is the newsroom of record in British Columbia.
Yes.
In a participatory democracy, like we have, what is the role of the media? What's the social license that you're given, and then how do you carry out that mandate?
Sure. Well, I feel a tremendous responsibility. Vancouver Sun, we celebrated our 100th anniversary in 2012, so we've been around for a long time on the province as well. So I'm editor of both papers and websites. And our relationship with our readers who have come back to us day after day, I feel a tremendous connection with them. We took a bunch of them, 600 of them, on a cruise back in 2012 for our 100th anniversary. And so to get to know these folks and see how they connect with the paper and how they connect with the world. We did a survey where we looked at, who are our readers? Why do they come to us? And what is their connection to the world? And what we found, it was very interesting, came back that they are, on average, far more likely to be involved in community organizations, to be politically active, to volunteer. And when I sat back and thought about that for a while, that made a lot of sense. These folks, we're one of the very few sources left that provide local news and information and analysis. And they're very plugged in and they want to know what's going on in their local world because they're a big part of it. They're heavily invested in that world.
Right, and they care.
And they care, absolutely. And they see how important it is that we're there holding folks to account who need to be held to account. Anybody who's wielding power, I certainly see it as our responsibility to make sure that they are wielding that power responsibly. And that can be politicians, it can be corporations, it can be unions, environmental groups, anybody can abuse the system, and we're out there trying to hold people to account when they do.
In essence, shining light on an issue or being an early warning system.
Absolutely. We're not necessarily the ones who will find it first. Sometimes we are, but we, in this age, we hope that people come to us, and there's many ways they can come to us through reach out to us through social media or call us, however they want to do. And when someone steps forward and takes that chance and comes to us with a story, especially if there's someone on the inside, if they're a whistleblower, in this country we don't have very strong whistleblower protection.
Do we have any? I don't
Not
know
really.
that we do.
No, not really. So it's very difficult for them. So they're entrusting you with potentially their livelihood when they come to you.
Yeah, but also as a reporter, you're in a bit of a perilous situation as well. Particularly in Canada, you don't have the same rights that a reporter in the United States has.
Absolutely.
You can't hide behind this confidentiality.
You can't. I mean, we're fortunate we have very strong lawyers who are very much aligned with our worldview around protecting journalistic sources. But push come to shove, you're absolutely right. The judge can order disclosure or the reporter goes to jail. And that's a difficult conversation that we must have with our sources. And I compel reporters, and it is, as I say, a difficult conversation. But at some point we have to say to them, listen, if we're going to go with this information, if we go down the track, this winds up in a court of law. We'll do everything we can legally to protect you. But ultimately, in this country, a judge can order disclosure.
Yeah. So, is your job to uncover and move the needle, or is it to report on what is being done? And, you know, we take a look at quite a number of people, or politicians, I'm going to use kind of the broad term without pointing fingers at anybody, who go, well, we have a fairly passive constituency out there, and we're just going to go through the motions of consulting. And then go ahead and do what we want anyways. Is it the responsibility of a newspaper to say, hang on just a second, I'm going to stand up for the average citizen and say what you're doing is going in the wrong direction?
Absolutely. I think the challenge, of course, for us is that there are an increasing number of gatekeepers. When you talk about government, even corporations, but governments in particular, and governments of all political stripes and at all levels. Their communications departments just seem to be getting larger and larger, and they set up barriers for access to the people who have the real answers to the question. And they try to deal, they think they can deal directly with the public, get their message out, their narrative out through social media and through their own channels, and that's what they try to do. And we try to get in the way of that when we think they're not telling us the whole story. But the challenge there, and this has become common practice, and unfortunately, is a reporter will send a question in around, we'll make a phone call, want to talk to the minister about X, Y, and Z, say 10 o'clock in the morning. They'll get a call back from a communications person. What are your specific questions? Could you put them in writing? They'll fire off an email. We'll sit around. Finally, at the end of the business day, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll get an email response back, and it will say, you can attribute this to the minister. And invariably, it won't answer the pointy end of the question, or it'll be an answer that really leads to more questions, which is the reason why you need to do the interview in the first place.
Okay, so how do you work your way around that? How do you address that? Because you are being managed then.
You are being managed. So I think I would urge readers to sort of paying attention in how we're writing these stories. We now go out of our way to point out in the stories that this was a written comment and we didn't have an opportunity for follow-up questions. Because I think it frustrates readers as much as it does us. If we simply quote them, the reader's saying is, well, hey, wait a second here. Did you ask them why that is? Or do you ask them the next logical question that anybody would ask? And we need to point out, we don't have that opportunity. So you don't have that opportunity, we have other ways. We have beat reporters who have sources and contacts within various levels of government and within various industries. So they can go to other folks who have the answers to the questions, hopefully, and get the answers there. And in extreme cases, and if we have time to wait, we can file freedom of information requests, and we can try to get documentation that way.
Is freedom of information not a misnomer, though? Because they have the opportunity to redact huge portions of whatever it is that's being released.
They do, but there are rules around that. There are reasons why certain things are redacted, and in some cases legitimate reasons, and other reasons not so. And we do have a commissioner's office, and we can appeal to have the redacted information released, but all of this takes time and money, and often can involve lawyers, which then involves a heck of a lot of money. It can cost us thousands of dollars anytime we want to go challenge a publication ban in court or appeal something. And again, there's a bunch of things I see happening out there. I see the courts holding, being far more loose with the introduction of publication bans. You see publication bans being introduced all the time on evidence that there's no reason to have it. Yeah. They just do it for reasons of expediency, in my opinion. Or closed courtrooms. We're seeing a lot more of that. And again, every time we want to send a lawyer down to challenge that, the clock starts ticking. And we're often fighting government lawyers in those cases, or people, gangsters lawyers who are paid out of the public purse. So we're expending taxpayers' money and our own lawyers to fight something that in the end we may or may not be successful. We've had some success, and we have, again, lawyers who are very aggressive in that regard. So it's happening there. And then we also have frankly, some lawyers in this town, and who are very quick to slap suits against us, nuisance suits, to try and shut us up, because they know it's going to cost us money to defend those cases, at least preliminarily, to go in and gather evidence for our defense.
So if the responsibility that you're charged with is to shine light on information that you believe that the general public has a right to have so that they can make informed decisions, do you then take a more proactive role and then start to crusade or create campaigns on your own that bring attention to this and literally force the hand of people who are, we charge with the responsibility of coming up with legislation to protect us?
Yeah, I think one thing that all governments do is, if there's a single story or a single news cycle and they can weather the storm over that 24 hours and survive it, and then the media's attention shifts elsewhere, that's fine. People will forget. People have short memories and they'll move on to the next
and one
shiny
story,
object. What does it do?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an ephemeral thing. It's gone. Yeah.
Certainly in my time as editor here in the last 5+ years, that's what I'm looking for now. And we have the luxury of a daily audience, people who come back to us every day. So they'll stick with us. So I really like doing 5, 6-part series, 7-part series, or
even more.
Getting your teeth into a story and just sticking with it and telling that reporter, okay, this is your job now for the next 2 weeks. You just stick with this story and break every incremental angle on that story that you can, and let's just keep it on the front page or keep it in the headlines until we invoke, as you say, some sort of change. The other part of that, though, is when we do these long stories or long series, like, for example, one we did recently on children aging out of foster care, where we certainly discovered a very terrible situation under the previous government, where there was no services. You turn 18, you're out, right? Yeah. You're out, and the family that supported you can no longer support you, and many wind up on the streets. And these are children who already are starting out in life with difficult situations, coming out of traumatic situations, PTSD, other things. So we decided to do a series that would profile a number of these young men and women who had aged out, talk to their families and their foster families, press government on why this was still happening, look at what was going on in other jurisdictions. I always think that's important too, because these things are not just happening in Vancouver or in British Columbia. Right. They're happening in Sydney, Australia, and in Tokyo. So we found Australia, they increased the age out to 25. They support services to age 25, and there was all kinds of reasons why they did that, for health reasons and mental and physical health reasons and financial reasons. And they were able to document over time how those folks became productive members of the economy, as opposed to folks who ended up being on welfare for the rest of their lives. So you're able to throw that back at the government and say, what about this? And then we always set out, if it's a 7-part series, we want that part 7 to be solutions-based. Here's what's, again, successful models in other jurisdictions, what some experts might say about some possible solutions. So we're then arming our readers, who are heavily community involved, with going out there and saying, why aren't you doing this? We're giving people hope. We're giving them some things to then go out and lobby on behalf of themselves, their friends, their broader community, and invoke change. And we've succeeded.
That's not a new model necessarily, but as we saw diminishing resources start to hit newspapers and radio and television and so on, we saw that kind of reporting starting to slide away because it was resource heavy.
Yes.
Go back 10 years ago. Could you have imagined that you are now starting to say, this is the thing that starts to set us apart?
Yes, I think that newspapers have always, that was our competitive advantage, our what distinguished us. Radio was always first. Yeah. Television had the great pictures and visuals and that connection with an audience at the 6 o'clock hour, right? And we were
Those days are gone.
Yeah, and we were always last.
Yeah.
We were always last. So when I was a reporter, if I had an exclusive, early in the day, I'd be just sitting hoping that Stu McNish or someone else from television didn't get it and burst my bubble before I could get it in the paper the next day. And that's not an issue for us anymore. I mean, we can now post stories online and engage with the community. And what we find as well is if you post something early, the early version of a story, you can actually attract folks who end up being part of the story the next day in the paper.
Or during the day.
During the day.
Yeah.
Yes, hey, this affected me too. Here's my story. I have a similar story. And they become characters in this unfolding drama. And they share it with their the wider network. And often, there are occasions where even having that story online and shared and gathering an audience and a head of steam can compel the government or the official who's been hiding to come out and make a comment and talk to you, because they know the issue's not going to go away, and they want to try and at that point get ahead of it, or at least get a piece of it.
You're still enthusiastic about this business, I can tell, just by the way that we're interacting here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I tell people out there, our sandbox may be smaller, but we define what that is for us, what those areas that we want to own, as I say, and the areas we want to cover, and we stick to our knitting and we stay within that area. Gone are the days where maybe we fly off to a lot of cover international stories and do things. For me, I'm very much focused primarily on Metro Vancouver, which, as you know, already in itself with 20 plus different local governments and regional governments and regional transit systems and provincial health authorities, it's a mishmash of jurisdictions. Just staying on top of that is a difficult job. So we pick our topics and we pick our spot.
You talk to the casual observer and they go, oh yeah, okay, well, we're in the death spiral of newspapers.
Sure.
Because every time I read the news, there's layoffs, they're closing down this, you're amalgamating that. What is the state of affairs? Like, are you making money, and does that mean that there is a future?
Yes. Well, it's interesting that our digital revenue continues to grow quarter over quarter. It's still not as much as we generate from the print product. That's still the lion's share of our revenue. But we're now at a stage in the newsroom where we don't really think about the newspaper versus the website, or whatever platform may be in our future. We think about the journalism and the storytelling, and where people read it is their choice, right? But we know that we still have a loyal, large print audience.
Are you finding that these are exciting times, and what do you envision over the next 4 or 5 years that will help you to fulfill that mandate of making sure that we are an informed citizenry?
Right. These are exciting times. I think solving, and this isn't, greater minds than me will come up with the solution around monetizing more effectively the digital space. So that's setting that aside. We now have journalists who are increasingly well versed. I'm very proud of our team. They've learned new digital skills, and some of them are reporters who, go back to working on typewriters, right? But we have young journalists, we have older journalists who've adopted a digital voice, and they're building their brands online and their expertise and their own audiences. So I see that as perhaps one area where we're going to continue to grow, is to continue to develop the specialty expertise of our reporters and allow them to build their own audiences under the umbrella of the Vancouver Sun and Province, so that this is the place where, if this is the issue that you're most interested in and you want to go back every day to learn about transportation in Metro Vancouver, this is where you'll go. And we'll bring in the expert voices, and people can ask us questions, and we'll get answers, and we'll be more heavily engaged, because as the platforms become more easier for us to engage with, whether it's Facebook or other platforms, and easier for the public to engage with us, that's certainly where I see it. I see the conversation broadening, and becoming more specific at the same time.
The financial crunch that has come with the changing landscape of being online and advertising revenue going in different places, everybody looks at it as being entirely bad news because people lose their jobs, newsrooms downsize, and so on. Have there been any upsides to this?
Well, I don't want to sugarcoat it. There has been, certainly has been downsizing, but I think the upside is that it's forced us to reevaluate what our objectives are as a newsroom and who our audience is. What is our primary audience here? We're not, we don't have the luxury, as I say, of running off in 1,000 different directions. So we pick our spots and we do those things well, and we try to align with the topics that we think are most of interest to people at a given time. And it may be a short-term beat where an issue is hot and burns hot for a few months or a year, or it's a long-term, something like transportation or real estate in this market, the looming legislation or legalization of marijuana. What I like now is that, unlike print readers who have always tended to be older, like you didn't typically read a newspaper or care as much about it until you bought a home and started paying taxes. So you didn't have a young audience for the most part. We have a significantly large 18 to 24 audience online now.
What's the reasoning behind keeping two papers, the Sun and the Province? You've amalgamated the newsroom, so
Yes.
why not just have one?
They both have significant audiences, close to 1 million folks, and the overlap is not that significant.
It's not.
No, not as significant as people might think.
Right.
And as well, geographically, the audiences tend to be different. The province's audience tend to be more out towards the Valley, Surrey, and the Vancouver Sun's audience is much more of a Vancouver, North Shore type audience. And again, the province has a strong sports section and lots of sports coverage, and so we emphasize certain content in each brand as well, and that's the goal there.
Well, like everybody, I want our mainstream media publications to continue to carry on the role that they do. Independent media can focus on certain areas and shine light on that, but without major publications, as a society, especially in a democratic society, we'd be in trouble.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that we're going to see this as the baseline now that we move forward and grow from. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and perspective on where we're at.
My pleasure.